Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of a Russian sleeper asset to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. The logical fallacy we're looking at this week is the Non Sequitur Fallacy, also known as invalid inference and does not follow.
Yeah, so the Non Sequitur Fallacy is one of those ones that has a slightly confusing name because people think they know, I guess, what a non sequitur is. But there's actually different types of non sequiturs. And the one you're probably most familiar with is a literary non sequitur. If I could just quickly demonstrate. Mark, ask me a question. Any question about anything.
What's your favourite roller coaster?
I like the colour blue. So that is a non sequitur because the answer did not follow from the question.
No.
And that's what non sequitur means. It's Latin for does not follow. But a logical non sequitur is something different. It still means does not follow, but because we're talking about logic, we're talking about arguments, and it's about when a conclusion doesn't follow from the premise or the argument that's being made. So to give you an example of this, Trump tweeted in December of last year, "In the East, it could be the coldest New Year's Eve on record. Perhaps we could use a little bit of that good old global warming that our country, but not other countries, was going to pay trillions of dollars to protect against. Bundle up." So he's talking about a cold winter in New York as an argument against global warming. And it sounds, if you don't think about it at all, kind of plausible. But once you think about it, you realize that actually he's confusing global with local, he's confusing climate with weather, and he's ignoring the fact that climate change suggests that there will be more extreme temperatures and more extreme kinds of weather, for example, like the coldest New Year's Eve on record.
Yep.
So he's actually using extreme climate change to argue against climate change. It's like saying there isn't world hunger because I just had a Big Mac.
Yeah.
It's actually a class of fallacies in a way. It's a description of most fallacies, really, because the thing that most fallacies have in common is that they are arguments where the conclusion doesn't really follow on from the premise. But whereas most fallacies can be specified in a particular way, they can be called straw men or argument from popularity or things like that, non sequiturs are usually ones which don't really fall into any of the other categories, but still have that characteristic of the conclusion not following from the premise. Another example, and I'm going to actually break the rules here slightly because this one isn't from Trump, but it is Trump adjacent.
Right.
Because it's from a hearing that Congress recently held into the former FBI agent Peter Strzok, into basically whether his personal dislike of Trump was evidence of FBI-wide corruption and conspiracy against Trump, which itself
is a non sequitur. Yeah.
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 And one of the congressmen, representative from Arizona, Republican Congressman Paul Gosar, started his questioning in an interesting way.
By the way, I'm a dentist. Okay, so I read body language very, very well.
So the typical response to that would be, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So he's a qualified dentist. So, and one of the qualifications of being a dentist is that, so therefore I read body language very well. Well, I guess you would come across a lot of body language going on as a dentist, mainly from people that don't like going to dentists. You could probably detect that, even though they're saying, good morning, how are you? Yeah, exactly. But, something to do with keeping your hands over your mouth or something like that. Or just...
He is talking here to a highly trained counterintelligence agent in probably the world's premier law enforcement agency. If anyone knows body language in this room, he's probably the one. And he's saying that basically he has seen in one of Strzok's previous answers some anger. And being a dentist, he is very good at recognizing this body language. And this is a weird kind of mixture of the two types of non sequitur, really, because being a dentist and understanding body language are such completely separate things that it is a literary non sequitur and a logical non sequitur. So that they do sometimes cross over.
There's some sense of bravado. He's going, well, you may well be, a really highly qualified counterintelligence officer in the premium invested, but I'll see that and I'll raise you my qualifications in dentistry. And I think you'll find as a result of that, we are equal when it comes to being able to read anger in the room by the body language.
And if you watch the clip of this, actually, Peter Strzok has a beautiful little kind of smirk as he says this, because he immediately, you can see he thinks, well, this is going to be nonsense, whatever he comes out with next.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which it is, to be honest. But
yeah,
the whole hearing, Strzok just was surrounded by people who had no clue how to ask a reasonable question. Again, he's an FBI agent. He's the one trained in interrogation techniques.
Yeah.
There's no way that they were going to be able to get anything out of him that he didn't want to reveal or trick him in any way.
Exactly.
And he just made fools out of several of the congressmen.
Yeah. I mean,
none more so, I think, than Gosar.
Yeah. No, or perhaps there was something that he was able to spot from Gosar's body language, not least that he kind of squirmed and came out with this massive non sequitur. You think, what? You may well be able to read body language, but you can't hide the fact that you're doing what you're doing, and you are just revealing that you're not qualified at all to ask me any questions. So it's, very, very odd indeed, but a beautiful example.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British Politics Corner.
Just as we thought we were saying goodbye to Boris, I've picked another Boris example, because he too is quite adept at, shall we say, the beautiful English phrase, talking bollocks. He can talk quite convincingly for great periods of time on fairly high-profile interview programs without appearing to have prepared in any way for the interview. And he just seems to make stuff up. And
I think, as Trump recently said, it's the preparation. It's all about attitude.
Oh, right. That's, yeah. So you don't actually need to read up anything. It's all attitude. And look how successful it's been for Trump all this time.
Yeah.
Well, he got to be elected president, so can't be all bad. No, it can. So this example is of Boris Johnson. This is way before Brexit, way before he was foreign minister. This was when he was still the mayor of London, and he was talking about David Cameron, who was then the prime minister. And who would have thought we'd be looking back at those days as the glory days of British politics, when and David Cameron had been continuing the kind of doctrine of austerity, saying we've got to cut back everything following the bank crisis in 2008. So this is only 4 years later, 2012 in July. And Cameron had been saying, well, the austerity thing isn't going to go away. It's likely to last for another 8 years. And he's not wrong, nearly has. And this was the clip from the show that I want to play to illustrate the logical fallacy.
I was actually thinking of David Cameron, who'd been talking about this going on for another 8 years.
Well, I don't think there's any reason at all why it should go on for another 8 years. I think if we can, look at Bradley Wiggins is about to win the Tour de France. How about that?
There you go. A massive non sequitur. Somehow, actually, he kind of tries to explain it. He wrote about this interview in the Daily Telegraph the following day and tried to explain that he was trying to offset the gloomy mood about the austerity. So the several things going on there for Boris. For a long time, the Mayor of London was always the opposite party to the party in government, which has always been an embarrassment to government because it's in London. And so this was the first time for a long time that we had a Tory mayor and a Tory government. And so he's being very careful not to contradict what David Cameron's saying. So if David Cameron, who's the Prime Minister, is saying we're going to have 8 more years of austerity, Boris is trying to say, well, I don't see why there would be a reason for that. And then he kind of does this being, oh, look over there, because Bradley Wiggins, this is 2012, Bradley Wiggins is about to win the Tour de France. Bradley Wiggins is a British cyclist who is about to do wonderful things in the Summer Olympics held in London as well. So he was kind of the hero of the moment. So, and everyone was really proud of him, and we were looking forward to hosting the Olympics. And so Boris is kind of saying, yeah, never mind all the doom and gloom. Here's Bradley Wiggins. And it's just the massive jump from this. It's just what? If Trump is saying, you know, going into interviews is all about attitude, I don't know what Boris's attitude is. Probably one of under preparation and ignorance. And if that's his attitude, certainly came across. So but he does go on to say this.
How can anybody in this country
I think that's
be
a non sequitur
when Bradley Wiggins?
I think that's a very bold non sequitur. And on that non sequitur, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Over to Naga for the news headlines.
So brilliant. So there's Boris desperately trying to recover by just going, can I just no. And Andrew Marr, who's the presenter at his show, he's quite right. He just kind of goes, well, yeah, what you've just done is a non sequitur, you know, and Boris is trying to say how he tried to backtrack in order to explain this huge leap of faith when he's trying to say how can anyone in the country be gloomy when Bradley Wiggins is such and such. So he's trying to say we can get away with we can move on from 4 years of austerity under the Tory party and the prospect of 8 more years of austerity under the Tory party simply by looking at a cyclist.
Yeah, he's mischaracterising.
And really everything will be fine.
What they were talking about, because it was about austerity. It was about kind of saving money. And then he's basically kind of turned that into people being sad and gloomy. And we don't need to be gloomy because there's good things like Bradley Wiggins.
Exactly. So he's doing a straw man in the middle of it all.
Yeah, in a way. He's changed the argument to something else. But also, the fact that he kind of tied it together a bit helps this to become a non sequitur, because if we just had that first clip, if it was just, I don't think there's any reason that austerity should go on for another 8 years. Bradley Wiggins is about to win the Tour de France. That's definitely a literary non sequitur, but it's not a logical non sequitur because he's not trying to make any real argument. What that would be in terms of logical fallacies would be a red herring, where basically you're just distracting someone with a shiny thing. And we will talk more about red herrings in another episode, but the fact that he tied it in and said, no, that I'm talking about Bradley Wiggins because we're talking about austerity and being sad, and you can't be sad if that happens.
He tries to reverse fit it. Yeah. So Andrew Marr is actually saying, that massive leap that you just did is a bold non sequitur, but and whilst that's sinking into Boris and he's trying to retrofit the reason, he's still making another non sequitur in the process in his protest as well. And interestingly, Boris the next day says so there's a lot of gloom around. I felt obliged to try and cheer him up. How can anyone be gloomy when Bradley Wiggins is about to win the Tour de France, I asked. And then he says, that's a non sequitur, retorted the great Marr. who believes in chucking in the odd Latin phrase to keep people on their toes, which is exactly what Boris does.
He does it more than anyone else ever.
Yeah, he will fling in this, he does it more than a Harry Potter novel. He will throw in Latin phrases in order to obfuscate, in order to distract people, in order to flaunt his education, in order to establish his authority over us. And all it does is just make him look like an arse. So if that one then was an out-and-out literary fallacy masquerading as a logical fallacy, then the next clip is less of an obvious one, like Boris's wonderful one, but it is, I would maintain, a logical fallacy.
I mean, I don't know. I gather she was okay to go on a anti-Trump demonstration, so I'm not sure why she wasn't able to come and vote. But clearly the pairing system needs to be looked at. It's not working very well, and the trust has broken down, and that needs to now be looked at again.
So this is the Labour MP, Kate Hoey, speaking only last week, where there was a close vote over some finer points of the white paper about the Brexit exit deal. And it was getting really close, and the government were looking like they might lose, so they pulled out all the stops in order to make sure that everybody they could get to vote voted. There is a system in British politics whereby if somebody is unable to vote, then they are paired with a member of parliament who holds an opposing view, and therefore if each of them voted, their votes would cancel each other out. So the understanding is if there's an MP who is absent, not able to vote, they will pick somebody who would be standing opposite them, and they say to them, right, you don't vote, because that, if she was here, your vote would just cancel it out. She's not here, so we're going to have you not here. And what happened was that the MP that was paired with Jo Swinson, who they're talking about, who was off on maternity leave, actually did go in and vote. So the Tories were, it's one of these long-standing gentlemen's agreements, if you like, and the Tories aren't behaving like gentlemen. Surprise, surprise, because it was, I think they only won the vote by 6 votes. So it really would have made the difference if this pairing had gone through like it's supposed to, and that vote wouldn't have been counted. It would have been very, very close indeed. So, and the reason this is a logical fallacy, I would say, is because the MP talking about the absent MP says, I gather she was okay to go on an anti-Trump demonstration, which we talked about last episode with the inflatable orange baby. It's okay she went on the demonstration, so I'm not sure why she wasn't able to come and vote. Well, it doesn't follow. Well, the reason she couldn't come and vote is because she's on maternity leave. She's on leave. She's not at work. So it doesn't follow that because she went to the Trump demonstration, it therefore follows she should have come and voted.
She was protesting on her own time, basically.
Yeah. So it's like saying, well, she's been to the supermarket, so I don't know why she wasn't able to come in to vote. Or, she went downstairs at home, so I don't know why she wasn't able to come in to vote. Or she walked across the bedroom to check the cot of her newborn to check that it was still breathing. So I don't know why she wasn't able to come in to vote. If those were the examples, you'd kind of go, well, that doesn't follow at all. What you've just done is a non sequitur. But because she was out and about, not far from the Houses of Parliament at Trafalgar Square at the protest, why couldn't she come in and vote? Well, because she's on leave. She's not also at work. It's on her own.
It's reasonable to assume that she was trusting the pairing process was going to work and that the Tories were going to uphold their end of the deal, isn't it? So that she didn't, knowing that she was off work, she didn't need to come in and vote. Even if she was passing the Houses of Parliament at the time, she assumed that her pair was not going to be voting.
Exactly. I mean, you kind of think, well, yeah, if she's there, I'm in Trafalgar Square. I'll just nip over just in case the Tories are doing some dirty deed and not pairing me. And if she'd had done that, can you imagine the furore that there would have been? So why did you come in? I said, well, I didn't think that the Tories would uphold their end. The Tories would have been up in arms. They're going, how dare you accuse us of, they were up in arms as it was. How dare you accuse us of not upholding the pairing tradition? It's been going on for, of course we would have done that. But yet they didn't.
And here we see the fallacy in the wild.
So in the fallacy in the wild, we like to look at the fallacy of the week from a non-political point of view. And I don't know if you can get a lot less political than this, because it's the Chewbacca Defense in South Park, which has come to be quite well known, I think. It's from an episode called Chef Aid, where Chef is fighting the record company for the rights to be credited as a composer on an Alanis Morissette song that he claims ownership of. And the record company hires Johnny Cochran to represent them. And the defense that they use is known as the Chewbacca Defense.
Why would a Wookiee, an 8-foot-tall Wookiee, want to live on Endor with a bunch of 2-foot-tall Ewoks? That does not make sense. But more important, you have to ask yourself, what does this have to do with this case? Nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, it has nothing to do with this case. It does not make sense. If Chewbacca lives on Endor, you must acquit.
So the cartoon Johnny Cochran uses the defense that why would the Wookiee live on Endor with the Ewoks? And also, what does that have to do with Chef's case? It doesn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't make any sense. So you must acquit. That is definitely a non sequitur in all senses, because it doesn't follow on from the rest of the case at all. And logically, whether Chewbacca lives on Endor, incidentally, he doesn't, but that's another issue. Whether he lived on Endor or not.
Well, yeah, because it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Whether that makes sense or not is irrelevant to the case, obviously. So it's a logical non sequitur as well as a literary one.
Yeah, but I like the way he also says that doesn't make sense. And what has this got to do with the case? Well, it doesn't. This doesn't make sense either.
Nothing. So it doesn't make sense.
It's a kind of meta example. It's looking at its own nonsensicalness. Is that such a word?
No, you just made that one.
And then saying, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And neither does this. And therefore you must quit.
We have another example, which is a lot more recent. In fact, it's from the new Sacha Baron Cohen show, Who is America?
Obamacare doesn't work. I mean, I know personally, I was a healthy man, then Obamacare came in. I was forced to see a doctor. And suddenly I had 3 diseases. Suddenly I had diabetes 1 and 2, I had obese legs, and I had chalky deposits.
So the character that Sacha Baron Cohen is playing is Billy Wayne Ruddick, who runs this website called truthbury.org instead of library, which in itself is brilliant. And he does that lovely non sequitur. We say, well, Obamacare doesn't work because I was a healthy man, and then I went to see a doctor, and now I've got diabetes 1 and 2, obese legs, and chalky deposits because of Obamacare.
And actually,
right. And there you go.
As I said before, the non sequitur fallacy, basically, it kind of covers most fallacies. And in a way, another fallacy that he's committing here is the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, which is basically where you confuse causation and correlation. Mm-hmm. And he's saying that the correlation happened because he went to see his doctor because of Obamacare, and now he has these diseases, ignoring the fact that the causation was actually not linked to that. He had the diseases before and he only found out about them through seeing his doctor. But he relates the correlation to the causation. So that's a fallacy, and that's why his premise does not lead to his conclusion, does not follow.
Yeah. So what he's done is left out the causality bit. And I wonder then if all non sequiturs are simply a logical statement, or a statement of logic that goes from premise to conclusion, but deliberately leaves out the cause and just tries to ram the premise and the conclusion together.
Not necessarily. Sometimes they can be, but sometimes it's just it's often a kind of line of reasoning where it takes you all the way to a conclusion and then gets the conclusion wrong because they've misunderstood the lines of the argument, or they're determined to come out with a conclusion that they've already decided on. And that is still a non sequitur because the conclusion does not follow from the premise. But it's not necessarily because the cause has been omitted. It's just because they've misunderstood or something else has happened along the way. Going back to the Gosar example, when you say about if there's a cause missing, it may be that in some cases like that, where he just says, I'm a dentist and so I understand body language. It could be that there's something missing, that in his head there is a reason why dentists understand body language, and he's not stating it because either to him it's obvious or it doesn't need saying for some reason. And clearly it does to the rest of us, because it's not clear how those two things are linked. And I think that is probably the case in sometimes when something is obvious to you, you might just assume that it's obvious to everyone else. That's actually a recognized kind of cognitive bias, is that you assume people see the world in the same way you do and have the same information you have. So sometimes you may say something, explain the initial argument and explain the conclusion, and you know how you got there, but you don't explain it to other people. And so to other people it might seem actually like a fallacy. And the way you're presenting it may be a fallacy, it may be a non sequitur, but there is some logic there. There is a logical thread that you just haven't explained.
So the lesson we learned doing our math exams when we were younger is show you're working, if only to reveal that you aren't an idiot that's just making non sequiturs like Billy Wayne Ruddick is deliberately doing it for comic effect.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
So it's time for fake news, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news. Or actually, you read out 3 and I guess the wrong one. That's how it's been so far, every single time. Now there's a theme to this week's quotes, and it's all about Putin because of the Helsinki Summit last week, and it's things that Trump has said about Putin that don't necessarily match up. So, number 1, this was said in November 2015. As far as the Ukraine is concerned, and you could Syria, as far as Syria, if Putin wants to go in, and I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes, we were stablemates, and we did very well that night, but you know that. Number 2, this was from July 2016. I never met Putin. I don't know who Putin is. He said one nice thing about me. He said I'm a genius. I said thank you very much to the newspaper, and that was the end of it. I never met Putin. Or number 3, this was from September 2016. I was in Russia years ago with Miss Universe, which did very well, and we were in Moscow, the Moscow area, and Putin came to see me. He could not have been nicer. He actually gave me a beautiful gift. I won't tell you what it was, but we got along great. Putin's fine. Okay, so I think that number 1, I think see, the trouble is, as soon as I say that, I know that you've written it. I think the first one I've heard, and I love the way he just tapers off. And he kind of goes, so there you are, as if he says something of enormous import rather than just the insane ramblings of a Russian mole. Okay, number 2, I never met him.
And you got genius in there. See, I don't think... Okay, and the Miss World one... See, you've done the usual thing and kind of base it on a crumb of something that I may have heard of and therefore convinced by. There must be a name for that logical fallacy. It's just called deceit. Okay, I think number 2. I think you made up number 2. I don't think Putin called him a genius.
So you think the 2 quotes where he said he's met Putin and got on well with him are true, and the one where he said he never met Putin is false?
I see what you're doing there. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Oh, God.
Okay.
Given the I think 1 and 3 are real. Number 2 you made up.
So let's start with number 1.
Despite the evidence. Yeah.
And number 1 is real.
But as far as the Ukraine is concerned, and you could say Syria, as far as Syria, I like if Putin wants to go in, and I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes. We were stablemates, and we did very well that night. But you know that.
It's great. He judges other leaders on the basis of just being on the telly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically that, because actually they didn't meet on 60 Minutes. They were both in the same episode, but they were on different segments. Trump filmed his in New York. Putin filmed his in Moscow. So
what?
The fact that Trump says I got to know him very well is a complete lie.
Wow. So he's lying about having met him.
Yeah.
Like he does anyway. So he's lying about having met him like he lies about having met him. Wow. When was that? 2015?
That was November 2015. He said that. Now, in July 2016, number 2, you think this is the one that I made up.
Oh, no.
And number 2 is real.
I never met Putin. I don't know who Putin is. He said one nice thing about me. He said I'm a genius. I said thank you very much to the newspaper, and that was the end of it. I never met Putin.
So 8 months after claiming that he got on, knew him very well, got to know him very well, he then claimed he never met him. Doesn't know who he is.
Yeah. So I should know Trump well enough by now to know that it's actually, if there was a direct contradiction, then that would have been said by him. Of course. Yeah. Why?
So number 3,
stupid.
About being in Russia. Yeah. He did go to Russia with Miss Universe.
Yeah.
He was in Russia in 2013, but he didn't meet Putin.
Very good.
Very
nicely done. And the gift, I love and he gave me a special gift. Can't tell you what it is. Yeah. What? And I immediately kind of thought, I think I know what it is. I think it was, then I've got no idea because you made it up. No.
So,
what episode is this? 5?
This
Am I now
5.
5-0 down? No, there's no coming back from that, is there? we should just rename this as, I will read out 3 quotes and Mark will get the wrong one. Just call it that.
Maybe you should try getting the wrong one. See if that helps.
Oh, yeah, maybe I should do that. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than just accidentally do it. Yeah. Or just have faith in what I know about. Well, you see, that's what Trump does to you. You've got no idea what he's going to do, so he couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
That's the whole premise of the game, isn't it? Yeah.
So the most important thing, obviously, is that I remain undefeated at fake news.
Yeah.
But podcast listeners, I need your help. I can't continue, surely, to fool Mark. It's seeming pretty easy.
Well, I don't know.
But I at some point I'm going to fail, and it is difficult coming up with these quotes. So if you think you can come up with a convincing fake Trump quote, then share this episode on Twitter, include your quote and the hashtag Fallacious Trump, and I'll pick the best one and you'll be podcast famous. So this is the part of the show that this week is called Treason is Not a Logical Fallacy. And this is where we want to talk about all the things that are going on in the Trump White House, but there's too much crazy stuff going on, so we have to pick one story. And this week, well, it has to be the Helsinki Summit, where Trump met Vladimir Putin, finally, although actually not for the first time. And it was kind of weird because, I mean, I think I can't remember who said it online, but someone said, yeah, we expected a little bit of treason, but not as much as we got.
Yeah.
And the weird level of subservience that Trump shows to dictators it's really strange, especially coming off the back of some of the mean things and the rude things he says about America's allies. About he went into this summit basically having just said that one of America's greatest foes was the European Union, and having trashed NATO and called Germany puppets of Russia or captives of Russia, and having come off a couple of months ago talking about Justin Trudeau and being basically a bad leader and all of the tariffs, the trade wars that he's having with everyone else. The only people he seems to want to get along with are dictators. He likes Xi Jinping. He likes Kim Jong-un now. He likes Putin. It's really strange. It seems like maybe he wants to be like them. He wants to be one in the gang, one of them, the club members.
Yeah, he wants people to stand up and salute when he comes in the room. He wants people to sit up straight, and he wants people to not kneel down when the flag is up and the national anthem is being played. He wants to have the strength of bearing that those leaders have. But he's completely ignorant of the fact that they've got that. It's hard won, mainly by torturing and seeing to the death of many of their citizens, so that they are completely terrified of doing anything in case the leadership brings about their demise. Consequently, it's not particularly pleasant to live in those regimes.
Yeah.
Certainly not, the home of the brave and the land of the free. And to want to have that kind of bearing and, dare I say, respect that he thinks is being paid to those dictators, it comes at a massive price, Donald. And you're completely ignorant of that, you idiot. And and hanging about with dictators isn't going to bring you the respect that you want. It's just as well Ceausescu is dead.
They don't even treat him like an equal. It's weird because supposedly Russia is kind of not as important in the world, on the world stage, as America. North Korea certainly isn't. But by having these meetings, he is legitimizing these other world leaders, these dictators, and then he goes along and he looks less important than them. He looks less in control and less powerful. And they come away with their propaganda machines in their countries saying what a marvelous success it's been. And only Trump is saying what a marvelous success it's been on his side. Everyone else is saying what a horrible failure it was in every way. Yeah. Because he although he has Fox TV, Fox News, he doesn't have the same kind of propaganda machine. He doesn't have a country where people will be imprisoned for saying things against him. So I'm sure he'd like that. But so the people who are actually looking and seeing what he says and what he does, they're not required by the state to say, great success. Whereas that is what is being done in Russia and in North Korea. And to a certain extent, from their point of view, it is a great success, because what it does certainly for Kim Jong-un, it does elevate him to the level of a superpower's leader. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why the Kims have been trying to get a meeting with the US president for years. And it's only Trump that was stupid enough to agree to it, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and he's kind of under the misapprehension as well, Trump, that he is fixing something that's never been able to have been fixed before. And it's not as simple as that. It's not a matter of, okay, nobody's thought to just go and talk to these people. There's a reason for that. And part of that reason is the same reason as why those people are the dictators that they are, is because the regimes are appalling and we don't really want to be encouraging them or giving them the light of publicity and therefore legitimacy in the world's eyes. We want to be doing the opposite of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The New York Times reported this week, actually, that Trump was told 2 weeks before his inauguration that the Russians definitely meddled in the election and tried to sway it for Trump. And supposedly at the time they said that he kind of grudgingly accepted this. But he's gone back on that such a lot, so many times. He's occasionally said he thinks it might have been the Russians or someone else. But
yeah,
in this in the summit, he was asked again if basically he would say that to Putin, if he would say that it was him, as the US intelligence agencies are saying, as Dan Coates is saying, the director of national intelligence, and he said. I'll play what he said in just a moment, but and then he was basically forced to backtrack, and I'll play the backtrack will follow directly on, so you can hear his words kind of one after the other and see what you think.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this: I don't see any reason why it would be. I came back and I said, what is going on? What's the big deal? So I got a transcript. I reviewed it. I actually went out and reviewed a clip of an answer that I gave. And I realized that there is a need for some clarification. It should have been obvious. I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. And the sentence should have been, and I thought it would be maybe a little bit unclear on the transcript or unclear on the actual video. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative. So you can put that in, and I think that probably clarifies things pretty good by itself.
So that's easely done. Who among us hasn't
said
would when they meant wouldn't?
Exactly. Of course, I would do the washing up afterwards.
Yes.
Oh no, I meant wouldn't. Yeah. Why is the washing up? Yeah. Why is the washing up still not done a week later? Oh yeah. Well, but just for the sake of clarity, and in case it was unclear on the video, I said actually that I wouldn't do the washing up. Yeah.
So the fact that it took him more than 24 hours to say actually I said the wrong would. I said wouldn't instead of would, or would instead.
Yeah. Doesn't imply at all that there were a whole bunch of people running around going, how on earth can we get out of this without...
Apparently he came up with that solution to claim that he misspoke.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it is one of the first times he's actually admitted a mistake.
Exactly, yes. He's backed down rather than double down and just go, oh, actually, yeah, no, I did say that. And what's more, I said they would, they could, and they should do it. He didn't actually do that, which is surprising.
So when he was giving his apology on the day after the summit, he actually had a typewritten statement. You wouldn't know it from the amount he went off script. But the weirdest thing about it was written really quite large across the typewritten script in black marker were the words, there was no collusion, with, incidentally, collusion was spelt wrong. It had only one L. I don't really understand that. Does he need to be reminded to say there was no collusion? He doesn't seem to need to be reminded. He says it
given that
all the time.
Yeah, given that picture turned up on Twitter, do you think that he was, other people just kind of snapped it and went, oh my God, there it is. Do you think he's not smart enough to do that.
No,
just thinking, did he write it on there knowing that people would see it?
I think he was trying to remind himself that if the opportunity came up, he should mention there was no collusion.
He should work that in. Wow.
It's so weird. Lindsey Graham, I think, said that Trump doesn't really get the difference between the Russians meddling in the election on his behalf and collusion with the Russians. And he doesn't understand that could happen, the meddling could happen, and he could admit to that, and he could say, yes, it did happen, without admitting that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. So I think that seems to be why he so frequently goes back on, every time he says, okay, yeah, it probably was the Russians, he then also has to say, well, in that meeting, in fact, he said, could be the Russians, could be someone else. There's a lot of people out there.
Yeah, yeah.
And even though that meeting was, it was actually a meeting for something else, but the typewritten statement that he had was specifically designed to make it clear that he agreed with his intelligence agencies who said it was the Russians. He still couldn't quite bring himself just to do that.
I was surprised he didn't just write there was collusion and then wrote no slightly above and then put a little arrow.
No collusion.
Yeah, I meant to add that in. Yeah, I meant to say no, just for clarity, in case it wasn't clear on the video. I meant to say no collusion, not there was collusion. And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
Trump found a way to distract everyone from Russia this week, sending an all-caps tweet to the president of Iran promising consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before if Iran threatens the US. So in a few months, Trump will be having a summit with Rouhani and telling everyone he's a great guy with a good sense of humour.
Trump decided that the disastrous economic fallout from his trade tariffs is no big deal because thanks to the rise in the stock market during his presidency, we're playing with the bank's money. I'm sure that the thousands of ranchers and factory workers whose jobs are at risk will be very happy to hear that.
Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, secretly taped conversations from 2016 where the pair discussed paying off Playboy model Karen McDougal, who claimed she had a 10-month affair with Trump. Here's a tip. When your lawyer is taping your conversations for their own protection, you might be doing something illegal.
Yeah. Trump met Queen Elizabeth on his trip to London. He kept the 92-year-old Queen waiting in the hot sun for 14 minutes, then stood in front of her as they inspected the troops. Jesus Christ, Donald, even if you don't respect women in general, she's the fucking Queen! And this was the one moment, and she was the only person in the world who could have shot Trump in the back of the head and got away with it. Whip a pistol out of the back of a corgi, bang, stuff it back in, look the other way, saying, I say, there's a man over there on a grassy knoll.
The Trump administration are trying to reduce the protection currently given to endangered species by reforming the Endangered Species Act before the midterms, because killing bald eagles is a sure vote winner.
Yep. Sarah Sanders reports that Trump is planning on revoking security clearance from former national security officials who've, and I quote, politicized and in some cases actually monetized their public service security clearances and have been making baseless charges to which such clearances provide inappropriate legitimacy to accusations with zero evidence. Pretty much like the way Trump is using the entire office of being the president then.
On July 27th, 2016, Trump said in a news conference, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. Well, it turns out they were listening, because within hours, according to the latest round of indictments from Mueller, Russian hackers made their first attempt at accessing Hillary Clinton's personal servers.
And Donald Trump's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame has been destroyed with a pickaxe for the second time. The star was awarded in 2007 for Donald's work on The Apprentice. Maybe if he'd won an Emmy, like he'd always wanted, we wouldn't be in the mess we are now. You know, like if Hitler had been a more successful artist.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this episode. If you hear Trump say something stupid and wonder if it's a fallacy, email us on fallacioustrump@gmail.com or find us on Twitter @fallacioustrump.
If you think we've used a fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher or wherever else you get your podcasts.
You can support the show on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ftrump, where you can get early access to extended episodes, exclusive bonus content and other cool stuff.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission, so until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right, go home to mommy. Bye.